an alcoholic,
Hey, Russell.
and I haven't found necessary to have a drink since January 25th, 1981, and I was 31 years old when I came in, 31, and I'm 75, how old am I? 75 years old, and so I'm in my 44th year of sobriety, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 7th step. Who knows? We'll see. You'll be the judge of that. Whatever, I'm going to talk to you about something, you'll be the judge of whatever I spoke to you about. I mean, we got like 40 people in the room. That means that's like 40 different messages going out. I used to think, I realize now that, because I have that story that I'm not going to tell today because it takes up too much time, where you never know what you're going to say. I went to a room once and a guy came up and he said, "You saved my life when you said the chicken was on the roof." And I knew what he was talking about because I was talking some poultry in the meeting. And he said, to him, he says, "You saved my life." He told me about he was going to commit suicide, and then he heard me say the chicken's on the roof, and the entire program came together for him. And I'm saying to myself, I never said the chicken was on the roof. I said, the turkey's in the basement or something, and he misunderstood, but I took credit for it anyway. I said, "Oh yeah, I always say that shit, chicken on the roof," and so I realized that this poor guy was going to kill. His wife had left him. He had lost his job. She had taken his kid. He was going to go out and drink, but he stopped in the A room. He was sitting all the way in the back of the room where these people sit, trying to blend into the wall, and I said turkey in the basement, and it sort of like floated down the room, and when it hit his ear, God knew what he needed to hear, and chicken on the roof became turkey in the basement, and his whole life changed. So I realized that, all we can do, I thought my job was to carry the message. Like if I'm talking here and somebody says, "Well, DeMarco drank," I say, "Oh my God, that's my fault. I'm supposed to," but now I realize the only thing the Lord tells me to do is to try to carry the message, and that's try to do the best thing I can do, and the best thing I can do is try to be as transparent as possible. And so I really sort of plan this stuff. I've been doing it for like 44 years, so I have an idea of what I'm going to say or what I want to talk about. It doesn't matter. It goes out the window. I just say whatever's on my mind. But the bottom line is I now realize that whatever I'm going to say, you're going to hear what you're going to hear, and we have people with 6 months or 1 month. We have people with 10, 20 years, and different people hear different things. And I now realize that most of the people, I'd hear people talk for an hour at a convention, or I talk for that long. And sometimes you walk away, you just heard one thing. You can't tell anybody anything. A week later, you don't remember anything the guy said, but you remember one thing. And if you get one thing that propels you in the right direction, that's a winning night. One thing, I did a meeting, I think I titled it, "You're going to wind up where you're headed." If you keep on walking, they used to tell me, if you keep on walking this direction, Russ, you're going to wind up where you're headed. And every once in a while, you're walking in a certain direction, and it's not a good direction. And you bump into some Eskimo. Bob's aunts used to call them Eskimos. Some old timer who tells you something, and because of something he tells you, you shift your direction 1 degree, and instead of winding up in this direction, you wind up in a different direction. And this is about, for many people, it's about going to meetings and just having the direction changed 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, and winding up in a different direction. And you bounce into enough people that are, let's say, talking about the real program and what this thing is all about, you're going to hopefully wind up in a point of view where you're going to be able to help a lot of people. And you're probably actually even going to get to the point, even though it seems impossible, where you lose fear of other people and what they think about you, and of economic insecurity, which is a little bit about what I'm going to talk about tonight, because 6 and 7 are the old-timer steps. They're the steps that really separate the men from the boys, and there is a separation in AA. Now, the way I do this thing is I happen to believe 2 things. Number one, I believe besides knowing the material, because I know the material, I've read this stuff, and over a period of many years, the best thing I can do is talk about my own experience. I may give my opinions. You don't have to trust my opinion or believe my opinion. I'm not trying to hurt anybody, and I'm just trying to help you all, but I have certain opinions. And, my sponsor used to say, when a man with experience meets a man with money, the man with experience will walk away with the money, and the man with the money will have walked away with an experience. And I used to be intelligent. I graduated with Department of Allowance in Mathematics. I was going for my PhD in algebraic topology. I ended up going to law school. There's I have a whole bunch of degrees on my wall, which I told my sponsor about. One time when I was about 6 months sober, I said, look, these are all my degrees. He said, well, Russ, rectal thermometers have degrees. You know what they do with those. So, so I used to be intelligent, but then by listening to my sponsor and suffering repeated humiliations and repeated crushing of my self-sufficiency and ego deflation and depth for the last 40 years, I'm no longer really smart. Because someone is the smartest guy in the room, I was the guy who knew that you were wrong. I was the guy that knew that you were full of shit. I was the guy that wasn't going to listen to you because I had all the answers. I was the guy who said, well, I know this is what I'm going to do. I rarely ask people, what should I do? Or what do you think I ought to do? I said, this is what I think I ought to do to protect me from your telling me to do something I didn't want to do. And I did the steps like all alcoholics do the steps. I did all the steps except for the ones I didn't want to do. And unfortunately, the stuff you don't want to do is the stuff that'll get you drunk, and will keep you in a position where you're not drinking but you're miserable. Here and there, once in a while, an alcoholic dry in the moment says, "Feel better, look better, having a better time." We laugh. We laugh at what he says when he says he's never going to drink again. We know he's going to try the old game again because he's not happy with his sobriety. Soon he'll know loneliness as few do. And one of the interesting things about being around for over 40 years is my experience is different. They used to have this commercial, the farmer's commercial. He says, we know a lot because we've seen a lot. It's not that I'm bright. It's just I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of changes in my life. No matter where you're at, and no matter what you think tonight, what you think this program is about, what you think your life is about, in 10 years, it's going to be completely different. You have no idea what you're going to be thinking in 10 years. You have no idea what you're going to... let me tell you something. If you have 5 years in here, you probably went through tremendous changes in your thinking about your life since the day you walked in. And you've been sober for 5 years. Think of all the changes that have happened to you in your thinking about things, all the things you've suffered, all the stuff that's been through, the books you've read, the people you've listened to in the last 5 years. What do you think you're going to be thinking of in 20 years? Should you be alive and sober, or even not sober? So what I realize is when I'm speaking in a meeting, I'm speaking to people that are listening to me from the vantage point of 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or 5 days. And they're hearing different things, and different things are clicking with them. And some people aren't even hearing what I'm saying at all. And as a matter of fact, one of the stories I'm going to tell you is a story about me not hearing something. How easy it is not to hear something, especially when you're smart. And when you're smart, you think you know everything, and other people don't know what they're talking about. And usually, if you're insane, and alcoholics are all insane, you don't have to agree with me because it's not me that's saying it. It's the big book that says God will restore you to sanity. And if you're already sane, you don't need to be restored. You know what I mean? Now, you can stop drinking one day at a time for many years. It doesn't necessarily mean you've been restored to sanity, because I don't know about you, but I have a disease that centers in my mind, not my body. You know what it says about drinking? It says drinking is only a symptom of our problem. This is big book stuff. You don't have to believe me. I know the big book, but I also happen to know it's true because I've seen it in my life and other people. Drinking is the symptom. Everybody comes in here to stop drinking. They stop drinking. They think, drinking is a symptom. The real disease centers in our mind, not our body. That's the disease that causes us to be insane. I don't need alcohol to hurt people, to be sarcastic, to rip their hearts out, to be selfish, to not give a shit about anybody except myself, to make poor judgment. I don't need alcohol to do that. What does it say? Selfishness, self-centeredness. That's the root of our trouble. driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking. We step on the toes of others. They retaliate seemingly without provocation. But we soon learned that we've made decisions based upon selfish decisions. Most of the time we don't think we're selfish. We think we're good guys, which puts us in a position to be hurt. So an alcoholic is self-will run riot. How do you know when you're self-will run riot? The big book says we have to stop playing God. How do you know when you're playing God? I happen to know the answer to that. When you're thinking. You know what happens when you come in here and you're insane and you have ideas and they're deep-centered ideas, old ideas. Let's say, what does it say? Unless until we get rid of our old ideas, unless we get rid of old ideas, what's the result? What do they say the result?
Nil.
It's nil. It's nothing. Half measures avail us what?
Nothing.
Nothing. So you come in here, you got all sorts of old ideas. Well, you get rid of the idea that you can drink, and drinking's not a problem, and you're not hurting anybody. You pretty much get rid of that real fast. And since they're handing out medallions and stuff, you think you're doing pretty good. But most of the stuff you do in your life, the things you think about, the people you like hanging around, the hobbies you like to do, where you like to spend your time, most of that stuff, you don't think it's a problem. So you run into some guy who's got 30 years sobriety, and he tells you the real problem with your life, Russell, is this. And he points to something that you're in love with. He points to something that you don't want to. He points to something that doesn't make any sense. Because if you're insane and your thinking got you in here, and you got into a lot of trouble, not only while you were drinking, but when you weren't drinking, just saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or not showing, when you're an excuseaholic, when you're insane and you come in here and you accidentally bump into one of those Eskimos, one of those sane people, and you ask him a question or he tells you something, whatever he says to you is going to sound crazy. See, if you're insane and he's sane and he tells you something, it's going to sound stupid. And you're going to look for another sponsor or get somebody else, and 20 years later, after coming back here 15 times, you're going to realize that guy wasn't so stupid. But you just didn't see it. And one of the things that happens to me is I have the privilege. I've always loved working with people, sponsoring people, doing step series. I've been doing it for a long time. But when you get to a certain age, and believe me, I'm not well. I don't claim to be well. I'm like the Apostle Paul, like what he said. He says, I haven't yet gotten this thing. I just don't want to slip backwards. I keep reaching forward, like the sixth step. Don't want to settle for just this. I know there's more. There's. I'm sure that whenever I speak at a convention or an AA meeting, or wherever I speak at, I'm sure that 95% of the people think I'm crazy. There's probably a huge percentage of people that don't like me. I know there is, because they come up to me and they say, I used to hate you, now I love you. But I'm sure but you see, I never really wanted what 95% of the people have. I don't want what 95% of people have. I want what Al Kennedy had. The guy who was dying of cancer, and he had 6 months to live, and he was at a meeting trying to help people, and didn't even mention it. I want that deal. Where can I get that deal? I want to know where I can get the Al Kennedy sobriety. I want to know where I can get the Dr. Bob sobriety. I want to get the sobriety that Alcoholics Anonymous number 3, Bill Dotson, talked about in Alcoholics Anonymous number 3, when he said, I was sober, and I was very grateful for what A did for me. He said, I was very grateful, but I knew there was something more. You ever say to yourself, you're sober, and you're grateful to be sober, and you're working the steps or doing whatever you're doing, but if you say to yourself, you walk around, you see people, you ever say to yourself, I know there's more, I know I'm missing something, I know there's more, there's something more. And he said, I know there's something wrong, because I would watch these people, they had a release, a happiness, something I thought a person ought to have. In the big book, they talk about being rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, experiencing much of heaven, and knowing peace. Not worrying about what other people think about you, not worrying about what you're saying at meetings, just being able to wear life like a loose garment, just being honest with people and talk to them, and not have to mark up books. And there's nothing wrong with that. I did that. Try to figure out what am I going to say and how, and all that sort of stuff. Just being yourself and, just sort of being able to wear life like a loose garment, and not be, as they say, 62. Not taking yourself too seriously, not taking things personally, letting things roll off your back, not worrying so much about the money. Money, property, and romance. How do you do that? Money's not important. It's just right up there with oxygen, I used to think these guys that I looked up to, I'd say, well, they got probably $1 billion in the bank. They're getting laid every night, they got a mansion or something. And some of these guys had all sorts of problems, but you could look at them, you hear them, you wouldn't know it. They were just, because they were not looking at the world, and they weren't looking at their life like I was looking at my life. You know what I mean? They weren't as smart as me. I was very smart, and when you're very smart, you're very aware. You got your radar out, you're looking at that guy, you're looking at that guy, somebody passes in the hall, you say, why didn't he say hi to me? You're aware of everything that's wrong, everything that's right. You're aware of shit that's going on the other side of the world that doesn't have anything to do with you, but somehow it has something to do with you. It's screwing up your day, you know what I mean? You're very aware of stuff, and that's a difficult way to do things, And you not only go to meetings, you got to go to meetings. You walk to me and say, I needed this meeting. You need meetings, just to vent or blow things off your chest, and then you get okay, and you don't drink for that day, but the next day you're going nuts again. It's the same old thing. It's something else. There's always, like Rosanna Dan on Simon, there's always something, that kind of thing. And so one of the things that happens to me is I get a lot of calls. I get about 3-4 calls a day from people that have 20, 30. Got one the other day from a guy with 38 years that are sponsoring people, that are in AA, that go to meetings and all that sort of stuff. And they're upset. They're suffering. They're not happy. And, all this stuff you hear in the meetings, like the reason people drink is because they stop going to meetings. Well, the real question is, why do they stop going to meetings? That's part of it. But let me tell you something. There's a lot of people that suffer, that have long-term sobriety, that are doing all this stuff because they're missing the secret ingredient. This ingredient is so secret. It's written all over every book in AA, but it's a secret, So I don't want to reveal the secret to you, but what I'm going to do, because if I told you what the secret was, what would happen? If I handed it to you on a silver platter, what would you say? That's bullshit. You would piss all over it. So I want you to figure out the secret for yourself after 20 years of suffering. I want you to figure it out the way I figured it out, And then when you figure it out, you'll say, holy shit, I could have had a V8. I mean, it's unbelievable, So I constantly, I go to a lot of Zoom meetings, some of these people, I go to a lot of Zoom meetings, do a lot of Zoom. We have a Zoom workshop, a 4-hour workshop, so it's serious stuff, and on Saturdays, and I can't tell you how many people come with 30 years or 25 years, and they say things like this. I said, I can't believe this. I never knew this stuff. I never heard about this stuff, and it's right there in the book. I'm going to point out something. So what happens is, I don't come in here saying, well, newcomers are important. I love newcomers. But I know in every A meet, I shouldn't say I know. I could say I suspect, based upon everything I've been told, as to what the percentages of people that actually make it to 20, 30 years. And it's like 0.5%. It's like 1 in 200. I mean, there's a reason why you don't have a bunch of guys with 40 years in here. It's not because they don't love AA. It's because they're not around. Because I think, Braden, you had some statistics on the treatment center. I said it last week where there were 350 people that went in that 1 year, 350 or 365. What was the statistic?
336.
Came in in the first year, and how many what was it? They did it at 5 years. How many were left?
36.
36. So about 10% were left after 5 years. How many were left after 15 years?
The highest one was 14, and only one person. So
one person after 14 years was still sober, and 15 years he was drunk. So out of 336, so I know that, and you guys are all lovely people, and I'm sure this group is going to beat the odds. There's no question about it. I can always tell when I'm dealing with somebody who's at a higher level, who's spiritual, not religious, and you've just evolved into some sort of incredible creature. Things don't shake you. You don't worry about anything, and nothing can possibly go wrong in your life. So, but the truth is, I always know that when I'm speaking at a meeting, there's going to be somebody there who's got 20 years who will probably be drunk in a year or suicidal. I just had a guy commit suicide. Yep. And he doesn't even know it. Thinks he's doing good. So when you have an experience like that, and it's not that I don't love newcomers. I don't come near saying, well, I hope I helped that newcomer. I hope I helped that guy with it. I come in there, I just tell my story, which has to do a lot. I have a real heart. In the beginning, I had a real calling and a heart for new guys. I was 8 years on relay in Dade County. If you called up AA in that 8-year period of time, you got me. I worked with new people all the time. I'd go out and do wet work and, bring them to meetings. I'd carry a flask so they wouldn't go into DTs and stuff like that. So I did that stuff. But now in my life, at 75 years of age, I seem to have a calling. I feel I have a calling. It says we're supposed to be a maximum service to God and other people. In my service, although it's not, you don't have to have a medallion in your pocket for me to help you. Believe me, I'll help anybody. But nowadays, I feel like my best service, because of my age, quite frankly, how long it is, to try to help people that have time. But newcomers can get out of it what they're going to get. So the best thing I can do is just share what I'm going to share, what my experience is with the 7-step. And some guys are going to get it, and some people aren't going to get it, and some people are going to think it's bullshit, but it'll be my experience at least, and that's the deal. So the first thing, listen, I'm going to read something. One thing I am going to read out of the 12 and 12 about the 7-step, just for laughs and giggles, and I read the big book differently now. I read a different big book. Think about that. Can you imagine that? It's not because I'm better than you or worse than you. I'm 75 years old. I've been doing this for 44 years. I read the big book. I read it differently than you read it. If you ask me about the big book, I'll tell you something. You might say, oh, I didn't read it that way. I read it that way. It doesn't mean you're reading it wrong. You know what I mean? I read it differently because of my experience. So, what's the requirement for membership in this organization?
Stop drinking.
No, it said the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Is that right?
Yep.
So if I have a desire to stop drinking, I can join. Now, it used to be an honest desire.
Right.
But they took that out of the book. It's still in the book, but they took it out. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop. A bad Saturday night, you got a bad batch of ice or something, whatever it is. A fleeting thought, it don't matter. You can come in here. That's the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Right, which is good because I had a desire to stop drinking. I even got on my knees on December 25th and said, God, please, help me. I had a desire to stop drinking. So I came in here, and everybody else was not drinking, and I wanted what they had, and I had a desire to stop drinking, right? You don't have to believe in God or anything, right?
Nope.
You don't have to read in shit. You don't have to believe in shit.
Nope.
I could be an atheist to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I could be an agnostic to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yep.
Right? I can even hate people that talk about God, still be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
Yep.
I don't even have to do the steps to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
Correct.
So I'm thinking there may be two different books. There, in this big book we have, maybe, fix that, Eddie. Maybe there's two books in here. Maybe there's not one book. Maybe there's like a book for a guy like me, and then there's a book for a guy with one day. Because the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to do any of that stuff, any of the spiritual crap. None. But later on in the book, by the time you get to chapter to the agnostics, it says this line. It says, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life, that means leaving good orderly direction, that's a philosophy, or do the next right thing. If a mere code of morals, a better philosophy in life would have helped us, we would have been sober a long time ago. They don't help us. We had to find a power by which we could live. Well, I thought the only requirement for membership, if you're in AA, is to stop drinking. But then again, not drinking is just a symptom of the problem. If you're crazy, the real problem centers in your mind. So you can do stupid things and hurt people because you're crazy. So what it says is this. This is a statement. People probably gloss over. He says, we had to find a power by which we could live. It doesn't say we had to find a power by which we could stop drinking. We get that power like immediately upon entering into your thing. We hold hands and say, whatever the heck it is, we get that. But now we got to find a power by which we could live. And therefore, of course, we have to talk about God. Well, where the shit did that come from? What fellowship would that be? What fellowship would that? We have to, and then you know what it says? We have to talk about God. I'll look it up, and I don't have to look it up. You can look it up for me. It says, here's where the problem happens with alcoholics. It says the hackles in their neck stand. You know what when a cat goes and the hackles, it says they hate God. A symptom of the insanity of alcoholism, if you talk to alcoholics about God, they hate you. I'm not saying all, it's a generalization. There may be some people say, I love God, the first, but they don't talk about God. And that permeates the entire fellowship of AA. The book says, all over the book, burn the idea into the alcoholic's mind that you can get well anything. Job and no job, wife or no wife, don't let him say that nonsense. You can get well as long as you give your life. Utterly abandon yourself to God. There is one who has all power, that one is God. God is everything or he is nothing. Half measures availed you nothing. See your real reliance has to be on God. He will show you even how to create the fellowship you crave. Apparently there's a godly fellowship. See to what your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass. You don't count as others, And then it says, you will surely meet some of us in the fellowship of the Spirit with a capital S as you trudge the road to happy destiny. Well, what the F? Which is unusual for me. I'm trying to get better.
Progress.
That's progress. What the hell is the fellowship of the Spirit? I came in here because I said the only desire for the membership is, the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. Now I'm at the end of the book. I'm on the last page and all through the book, and they're talking about that they're talking about God, and I have to join the fellowship of the Spirit. And so I'm in a fellowship where 90% of the people, maybe more than that, don't really get uncomfortable when you talk too much about God. People actually come up to you and say, you can't talk about God in here because you're hurting newcomers. They'll tell you you're actually hurting newcomers. You're killing newcomers. You had a fellowship that, by and large, goes to the lowest common denominator, assumes everybody will die if you talk about God. It'll make people uncomfortable, and the one thing you never want to do is make an alcoholic uncomfortable or suffer, you know what I mean? You just want it for two reasons. First of all, you want them to like you. You don't want them to leave, because that's like being rejected, and alcoholics hate rejection because they worry about what people think about them. You know what I mean? And so, and that's really the reason why, because we're so codependent, because we don't want to say anything to piece somebody up, because somebody say, I hate that guy Russell, and they'll talk behind our back, and we get scared. So we want them to like us. So we want to be nice and God forbid we should bring up the God thing too much. So here we have the book saying two different things. It's like a paradox. The entire book talks about getting into a state by utterly abandoning yourself to God. As a matter of fact, I think Dr. Bob said the books we found absolutely essential. 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, of the book of James. He said, seek ye first, the first things first means seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. All things will be added unto you. If you ask Dr. Bob, what's this program about? He says, what does it say in the Bible? I'm just saying, you can have your own opinion. I'm just saying that's what they thought. They thought you come in here to stop drinking, but you better get on the God train immediately. And you couldn't go to a meeting unless you got down on your knees and you prayed to God. And then 15 years later, 15 years after 1935, Bill Wilson had 15 years, they had a business meeting. They called it the conference. And they did a lot of good things. And I admire Bill Wilson. It was about 3 or 4 years before he started using the LSD. You know what I mean? He had a business meeting. You know what I mean? And he was the grand poopah, and he's done a lot of great things. I'm not putting him down because he wrote about this. You ought to read. You like the book he wrote? Right? He wrote it 3.5 years. Read the essay he wrote at 21 years after he almost committed suicide, went down the tubes. Was using the LSD. Read that essay and see what he says about the God thing and how he got it all wrong. I mean, that's why Dr. Bob said to him, he said, Bill, let's not screw this thing up. Let's keep it simple, because Bill was always worried about the God thing. Not Bob. Bob was a different situation, different guy. You know what I mean? So now we have this fellowship, this wonderful fellowship, where 90% of the people know you're not supposed to talk about God. You'll kill newcomers. You'll be responsible for the murder of you newcomers. You'll be the Adolf Hitler of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you got a big book, and all the big book says after the alcohol is you better find a relationship with God. And what that does to an alcoholic, let me tell you what it does to an alcoholic. There's a part in the book, it says, if you want to be rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence and experience, how many people would like to be rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, whatever the hell that is? I don't know. If you're an alcoholic or you're a dope addict and you want to be rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, I don't know what kind of dope addict you are, you know what I mean? How would you like to be rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, experience much of heaven, and no peace in your life, and not have any anxiety? How would you like that? He said, well, let me tell you how you do it. The great fact is this and nothing less. Number one, God's got to be the central fact of your life. The number one central thing you think about all the time. And number two, you must be convinced that he lives in your heart and mind in a way which is indeed miraculous. Do for you what you can't do for yourself. You have to be convinced. So let me tell you the problem we have in AA. The problem we have, the way I see it, as a guy who's been around for a while, is you have to abandon yourself to God. Because those people that hit 40 years and 30 years, whenever I'm confronted by somebody with 30 years or 20 years, you know what I find? Almost 99% of the time, this is what Sandy Beach used to say. Every problem is separation from God. Every solution is to reconnect with God. What I find is whenever I have somebody in AA and they're doing everything, but they're still unhappy, it's because they don't really believe in God. They believe in the concept of God. You understand? You say, oh yeah, there's a God. They'll hold hands, say the Lord's Prayer. But they haven't utterly turned their lives over to God. God isn't the most important thing. They won't even talk about it much at an AA meeting. Because what they believe in is the steps. What they believe in is going to meetings. What they believe is doing the work. And the problem is when you have 9% of people in AA that don't want to hear about God because the hackles in their necks are going up. You know what I mean? And you got a book that says you have to abandon yourself to God. There is one who has all power, and that one's God. God's got the power over anxiety. He's got the power over fear. He's got the power to give you courage. We never apologize for God. All men of faith have courage. How would you like to have courage all the time? All men of courage to say whatever you want to say at a meeting like this, whether there's 40 people or 500 people. All men of faith have courage. I guess men who don't have faith are cowards. And I was a coward. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. And instead, we let him demonstrate to others in our lives through our testimony what he's done for us. At once, we begin to outgrow fear. How would you like to outgrow fear? Everybody comes to me, well, what's the topic? Let's have the topic. How about fear? We'll talk about fear. Okay, let's talk about God. Well, fear, lack of fear is faith. We'll say all that, but you don't want to get too deep in the God thing. So you have a fellowship that gets uncomfortable if you talk about God, and you have a big book that says your only way out of this thing and to find true happiness is have an abiding conviction of God. And you know what that sets up with alcoholics? You ready? Doubt. Now, you may not think doubt's important, but the book of James, which, by the way, was the book they found absolutely essential in AA, the whole big book is written based upon the book of James. How do I know that? Because it says in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, the books they found absolutely necessary was Sermon on the Mount, 1 Corinthians 13, and the book of James. And this is what the book of James says. If you want wisdom, as to what this thing is really about and what your life is really about, if you want wisdom, all you have to do is ask God. And he'll give it to you generously. But when you ask him, you can have no doubt. No doubt. No half measures. No bullshit. No, I'm spiritual, not religious crap. No doubt that he's the number one thing in your life. The man who has doubt, this is how he describes the man who has doubt. It's like a wave in the ocean, uncertain in all his ways. Like a wave in the ocean. You can't trust him. You know what I see in AA? And you know what I saw in myself the first 20 years? 25 years?
Waves.
I'm not saying you know, second guessing myself. You know, telling myself I'm a loser. You know, saying, driving the car and saying you're such an idiot. But, you know, on the one hand feeling good, and then the other thing, you know, I mean, just a wave in the unstable in all my ways. Even as I'm sponsoring people, going to meetings, doing all this sort of stuff, still with that unstable sort of, not cemented, not what they say right before the big book. You see, we go to a quiet place and we say, is the cement strong? Is the foundation strong? You know? And you can understand that because 6 and 7 in the big book, it's 2 paragraphs. 2 paragraphs. So how important can it be? And so what we do is we skip out. We said the prayer. We say the 7th step prayer or the 6th step prayer. We say the prayer. We say, okay, we're done with that. We're done with that. And then we go right to what? 8 and 9 and 10, 11, 12. And then we never go back to step 6. And and then you find yourself at 30 years, you're doing all this stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous and you're not happy. Because you're missing the secret ingredient, because you never really did step 6. And you don't even do step 6. Step 6 is going to do you. And step 7 is going to do you. So in any event, let me rush through this thing real fast. So just an example of my sponsor, when I was 4 months sober, and I'm an attorney, I read the book, I read all the books, I underlined them, I understood everything, I got an A down. I was doing everything, and I was excited about doing it. So he says, I want you to hear this guy talk. He's a good talker. He's got 40 years. You need to hear him. He's got a great story. It was at the South Dade Room. So I go to the South Dade Room. Some old fart, somebody like me, gets up there and he starts talking. And he says, my name is Joe, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. I immediately knew the guy was full of shit. Based upon my vast knowledge about AA, and I'm a very smart guy, I'm not stupid, because I was told that we are not cured. Haven't you been told that? And I was a recovering alcoholic. And everybody I knew was a recovering alcoholic. And I never heard anybody say they're a recovered alcoholic. And here's this guy saying, I'm a recovered alcoholic. And I'm saying, what the hell? I said, and I had this feeling, I said, what an idiot. How could this guy be saying things like that? There are other people, there are newcomers in this room. He's killing newcomers. And all I kept on saying, and I got to tell you something, there was a part of me, I swear to God, I wanted to jump up and say, don't listen to this guy. We're not cured. You're not recovered. I went nuts. You know what I mean? And the meeting ended, and you know, he spoke for the hour, and the meeting ended. And I don't think I was wrong. I was absolutely right. And he said that. And I went up to see my sponsor. So my sponsor said, so how'd you like him? I said, the guy's an idiot. I mean, why would they invite that guy? He said, what are you talking about? He says, he said he was a recovered alcoholic. And my sponsor said, well, you are. I said, no, we're not cured. He says, Russell, read the big book. I says, I read the big book. You know how everybody says, oh, yeah, I read the big book. And then he opened the big book to like the forward or something. I don't know whether it's in the forward. It says, we have Alcoholics Anonymous, so 100 men and women who have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. I said, shit, I didn't read that part. I missed that part. You know what? You want to know the interesting thing? So he said, so what about the rest of his story? He says, I didn't hear the rest of what he said. He had 40 years, I didn't hear another word he said. Because I spent the whole time thinking of what an idiot he was. He didn't know anything. Imagine how great this talk would have been if I had listened to this guy. What did I miss? You know what I mean? Because of my intelligence, because of my sobriety, because I was spending the whole time criticizing him in my mind, you know, because of the way I looked at things at 4 months is different. The way I look at the big book at my time now is different the way I looked at it before. And so now we're just going to read these paragraphs, and I'm going to say one thing, and then and that's going to be the end of my life. Okay, so we'll get it. Okay, so this is step 7. This is step 7. Okay. Certainly, I'm going to read 3 paragraphs. Certainly, they're talking about humility. That's what step 7 is all about, humility, whatever that is. I have no idea what that is. It's something, but it's in this chapter. So they talk about humility, and then they have these 4 things. So it must have something to do with this. Do you understand what I'm saying? At my first meeting, now you're not going to believe, not my first meeting, my first 2 months in AA, I never said anything because I was humble. I wasn't like one of these speakers, full of their ego and everything like that. I would stand in the back room, I didn't say anything. So my sponsor went up to me and he said, I notice you're not saying anything. He says, no, I don't really have anything to say. He said, what do you mean you don't? I said, these people come to this meeting and they talk about the things that are going on in their lives and they share it with other people in the hope that maybe it'll help somebody. You understand? They're opening themselves up and you sit there like some sort of voyeur and you listen to everything they say and you give out nothing. He says, you're all get and you're no give. You know what I mean? He says, you're all about yourself and all you do is think about yourself. Well, how do I get out of thinking of myself? He says, you talk about yourself. I didn't understand that at all, you know what I mean? And so I started talking, and the rest is a history. Okay, so let me read these things. Certainly, this has to do with humility. Certainly, no alcoholic and surely no member of AA wants to deprecate. That means put down material achievement. Money, property, prestige, or romance. Yes, romance is thrown right in there. Money, property, prestige, and romance. Deprecate. We're not going to say you shouldn't have things. Okay? Okay, so relax. By the way, they're lying to you. They do that a lot in the big book. Sponsors do that a lot. They lie to you just to get you to do something. Then they say, I lied. Because that's the only way you can get an alcoholic. You got to flank them or lie to them or something. If you tell them the truth, they'll run away from you. Certainly no alcoholic and surely no member of AA wants to deprecate material achievement. Nor do we enter into debate with many who so passionately cling to the belief that to satisfy our basic natural desires is the main object of this good book. I got to get a romance, I got to get laid, I got to get a boyfriend, I got to get a car, I got to get this. If only I had this, We don't argue about stuff like that. We're not going to argue with you. That's a lie. Okay, you're lying. Nor just recognize that it's a total lie, what I'm reading to you. Nor do we enter into a debate with many so passionately cling to the belief that to satisfy our basic natural desires is the main object of life. And here it comes. You ready? But we are sure that no class of people in the world ever made a worse mess of trying to live by this formula than alcoholics. So we're not going to say that you shouldn't worry about money, property, and prestige. I just want you to know, if you do that, you're going to drink again. You're insane. Okay? So, they sort of say, you don't have to wear a parachute, but we suggest you put it on before you jump out of the plane. And then they say the problem is lack of humility. And then the next paragraph I'm going to read you is this. It says, this is on page 74. This perceived perception of humility starts another revolutionary change in our outlook. Our eyes begin to open to the immense values which have come straight out of ego puncturing. Until now, our lives have been largely devoted to running from pain and problems and running towards pleasure. Seeking pleasure rather than pain. Sounds like a smart move to me, quite frankly. You know what they say? It says that's a problem. I once called a rail chief. I said, I feel shitty. He says, this may be the best you ever feel. We fled for them as a plague. We never wanted to deal with the fact of suffering. Let me tell you something. The best thing that will ever happen to you in Alcoholics Anonymous is a serious 10 or 20 years of suffering the shit out of yourself. Bad things happening, suffering. I watch them bounce out of AA, all the cool guys. You know, they get too well too fast. They get the girl back. They get the guy back. They get the house back. They get the money back. You know, 5 years, they bounce out, they lose everything, and then they come back in. And the lucky thing for me is I was constantly suffering. Now, it's not like you always have fear. You know, everybody in AA is fearful and has anxiety. We just don't have it at the same time at the same meeting. Sometimes I've been to meetings that are like that, and then you have to go to another meeting afterwards just to get over the first meeting. But the bottom line is that suffering is a great part of doing step 6 and 7. Suffering is what gets you on your knees. Suffering is what gets you praying to God. Suffering is what gets you to go up to somebody. You know why somebody picks up the phone and somebody calls an idiot like, I got a call from a gal the other day. She had like 20 years. She says, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm desperate. I said, in other words, you got to be desperate. He says, yeah, I got to be desperate or else I wouldn't have called you. Suffering gets us to call people we would never call. Ask questions we would never ask. You know, that's what the book of James says. It says, rejoice when you have trials of many kinds, because if you persevere and you focus on God and you're walking down the road of happy destiny, instead of drinking or running towards pleasure or turning around, it says your faith will mature. And you'll be a man of faith or a woman of faith. And then what happens after that? What happens if you have faith? You're not a coward. Mm-hmm. And what happens? You lose fear of people and economic insecurity. And that's how you get rocketed in the 4th dimension of existence. But, you know, when you're insane like me, it doesn't happen. I got to tell you, in my kind of insanity, it doesn't happen after 10 years. Well, it happened actually after 10 years, is when I hit my bottom sober. My bottom happened to Bill Wilson at 15, 17, 18 years. He started with the other deal he was doing. You know, it's the problem is it doesn't necessarily happen right away. You understand what I'm saying? You could stay sober, just going to meetings, intensive work with alcoholics, hanging around AA. It's like hanging around the bar and stay sober for 10, 15, 20 years until one day all of a sudden you're doing everything and you realize you're lonely and you got nothing. And they said, well, what am I missing? The missing is you're doing everything, but you don't really believe in God. He's not the central fact of your life. That's what you're missing. You missed that 6-step deal and the 7-step deal. You know, that's what you're missing. So that's all I have to say. Okay?